Another early resident to own a car was Luther Barnett Cornelius, but folks around here just called him Doc Cornelius.
He first of all was a company doctor for coal mines near the Warrior area, and then he came on up to Coleman County and settled finally at West Point. He had a little office past his father's place over west of West Point School. He had an office, and I'm told he had an office and a drugstore there. But later he moved to West Point, and he lived at West Point for many years. He lived in the house that's occupied by Miss Geraldine Eddy now for a period of time, but this was in the 30s. But he built a rock house down there just below that house in the 30s. He lived in that house until his death. But he practiced medicine for almost 40 years. And I remember him as a man that could almost walk on water. I had that much confidence in his ability. I could be sick and thought I was going to die. He could walk into the room where I was laying in bed and I'd immediately start getting better. That's the confidence. He never did make much money. He had to take produce a lot of times for his fees, and I have a letter there where a man from Artie sent him $5 on what he owed him, and he said he'd make him a note in the fall if he couldn't get up any more. So he never did make a lot of money, but that's the kind of man he was, the kind of doctor he was. I remember he smoked a cigar all the time, and he told me that in medical school, when he began to work to dissecting cadavers, they smelled so bad that he had the formaldehyde and all smelled so bad that he began smoking cigars where he wouldn't smell those cadavers so much. And he said that's the reason he smoked cigars, and they got the habit of it. But when you saw him, you saw a cigar in his mouth. This is my grandfather's. He always called it a grip. He would say, "Paul Ed," he called me Paul Ed. "Paul Ed, get my grip." He had to go on a call, and that was a privilege for me to do. He carried everything in here that he would need, his medicines, his instruments, everything that he would need. And I was amazed, constantly amazed at the way he could have everything in here that he would need. He dispensed his own medicine. This is his stethoscope, and it's dry rotted now. The rubber hose on it's dry rotted, but anyway, this is the blood pressure cuff. There's a technical name for this, but I don't know what it is. They don't use these things much anymore. And I found yesterday a little notebook that's chock full of notes he took down when he was in medical school, and this would be in 1912 that he wrote this. I remember also one time I was down there this night that a man brought his son. The boy was about 12 years old, and he had picked up a dynamite cap, and it went off, exploded in his hand, and his hand was tore up pretty bad. And his father had carried him somewhere, and they said, "Well, we'll have to take his hand off." And the father wouldn't have that, and he brought him to Grandpa. And Grandpa looked at it, and he told my aunt who assisted him, he said, "Go get me a pan of warm water." She brought it back, and he put a solution in it to soak that hand. And after he soaked that hand for a while, he dried it off, and then they started sewing. I thought he sewed on that hand for an hour. I know it wasn't that long, but it seemed to me that he sewed on that hand for the longest time. And then I remember he put petroleum jelly on that hand and wrapped it in gauze. And he said, "Come back and see me in 3 to 5 days." Last time I saw that young man, he still had that hand, and it was a fully functioning hand.